Thank you for tuning in to the Business of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Dave Wakeman. Today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Booking Protect, the global leaders in refund protection. Any listing, any sector, anywhere, Booking Protect has you covered with the world's most comprehensive refund protection product. To find out how you and your organization can partner with Booking Protect to give your customers a better, more personalized buying experience, how you can create peace of mind for your customers in their purchase, and how you and your organization can create a new stream of revenue. Visit them at www.bookingprotect.com. Once again, that's www.bookingprotect.com. While you're there, make sure you check out the blog, where there's some great information about managing the sales funnel online, using data more wisely, the trends that are impacting your consumers and your customers' buying habits. There's a great ebook that's a partnership between me, Booking Protect, and the folks at Future Ticks on delivering digital customer service. A great resource. All that is at www.bookingprotect.com. My guest today is Colby Fackler, and Colby is with the Major League Soccer team in Vancouver, the Whitecaps. And if I must say so myself, I thought that this conversation was fantastic. It was a fantastic conversation as I stumbled over the words. It was great. We got to a lot, but I have a feeling that we could have gone on for another hour. Colby was really, really generous and gracious by being really, really, really specific about a lot. The joke was like maybe he's too transparent, but I don't think so. I think that he gave us maybe one of the most like nitty gritty meat and bones podcasts that I've ever done here. We talked about a lot. I mean, my Lord. We covered the difference in being a sports business professional in the United States versus Canada. We talked about how having a smaller population to draw from has influenced the way that the Whitecaps develop a sales, marketing, and service team. We talked about some of the attributes that Colby and his staff hire for. We talked about the difference between corporate partnerships and selling single tickets. We talked about not getting bogged down in the idea of selling a ticket and focusing on selling experiences. We talked about the value proposition. We talked about creating urgency. We talked about uncovering the hidden reasons for people to buy tickets. We talked about tangible versus intangible value. We talked about what clients remember, what they don't remember, what they value, what they don't value. We talked about the approach and the way that Colby and their sales academy and his sales team create retention strategy for their staff, and how they're able to achieve when they bring in a class, how do I want to put this? They keep 70% of the people that come through their sales academy for 4 years. I'm going to repeat that number because it's incredible. They keep 70% of their new hires in their sales academy for 4 years. He tells us how he does that, right? We talk about how he sets expectations for his team, how they grow, how they understand what they need to do to be successful. This thing that he talks about, breaking it down to the ridiculous late in the podcast, is just fantastic. We talk about the roadmap. We talk about how they innovate and how they lead generate and how they use technology. And we got a little bit into change, and change was one of the things we really wanted to talk about. So, I mean, it was just a lot, but it was really great. And if Colby hadn't had to go to another meeting, I think we would have gone on for like quite a bit longer. But this was this might be the best one that I've done, I think. This one I really, really, really was happy with the way it came out. So I'm really excited to hear what you thought and get your feedback about this episode of The Business of Fun. I want to welcome my buddy Colby Fackler from the Vancouver Whitecaps to the Business of Fun podcast. Colby, what's happening, man?
I'm good, Dave. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm good. I'm very, very good. I'm excited to have you on here. my deep dive into sports business continues with somebody from Canada, which international enough, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody seems to like it when I bring people on from outside the states. So Vancouver, just across the border, but it still counts.
Yeah, we're like the strange neighbor that lives in you guys' attic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell everybody that Vancouver's maybe the most beautiful city I've ever been to. So I'm sort of jealous because I was hoping that there would be like a picturesque backdrop behind you, but you got just the conference room wall behind you, but that's okay. Nobody can see it anyway. It's a podcast. But thank you for doing this. And I wanted to jump into a couple of topics because I know that you guys have a really cool sales academy and you have a really good team building approach. You focus a lot on training. You focus a lot on developing your sales agents, and I think you do a really great job. So I wanted to maybe highlight some of those ideas, some of the concepts, some of the things you guys do, in hopes that it'll maybe be able to transfer to other people. And you've been really gracious about talking about this. Let's start out by talking about the academy that you guys have built. What's the goal there, and kind of how have you developed it over the years?
Yeah, no, it's it really was bred out of necessity, to be quite honest. I mean, and you know what, to be quite fair, one of the biggest differences between US and Canada, especially in the sports world, in the US, I know, hey, people are moving all over the place, and obviously the breadth of sales people and talent is broad and wide, and people aren't afraid for moving to, well, even like yourself, Washington to DC, Washington, DC to New York and over to LA or wherever everybody's willing to move. But in Canada here, it's very centralized. We only have, I think at last count, we had like 26 sort of major sports teams in the entire country. So you can appreciate it's the talent pool is a little smaller when it comes to experienced ticket sales or partnerships or any of the salespeople. So we started looking around and went, all right, we can either keep beating the bushes and try to find people, or we can start to build them up. And so that's essentially what we started doing, was really developing this sales and service academy where we could find those young up and coming, have the right attitude, have the right thought process, have all those things, and start teaching them sort of the Whitecaps way, as we like to call it.
And you said something interesting there about the thought process, right? Which I think that as much as anything, selling is about the way that you approach it, and it's a thought process, right? I mean, let me not like belabor this. What is the right thought process for a successful salesperson? Or when you're hiring somebody, what does that thought process look like that you're hiring for?
Yeah, and that's, I don't think we've still got it totally refined, but some of the key things that we're looking for is curiosity, like somebody who is just sort of naturally curious, and that mixed with somebody who's got like grit, right? Just the resilience, because as we all know, whether you're out and about, hey, everybody loves sports until they got to buy tickets or seasons or partnerships or whatever else, and then all of a sudden maybe it's not quite the right thing for me at this point. So it's so you need that person to be able to, like, who just wants to learn about the other, whoever the client, prospect, fan, whoever it might be. You want them ever curious about their business, about their life, to be able to ask those questions and do those things. And not just because they've got a script of questions in front of them. Hey, you need to answer or ask 15 open-ended questions, but because they actually want to find out about this stuff. So having that side, and then just being able to deal with the rejection and deal with hey, that was a good call. That person's not going to buy today, but they might tomorrow, but I had a good connection with that person. So I'll leave it at that. And they're walking away saying, hey, you know what? That Whitecaps guy or girl was really awesome. And now I've got a person in the organization for if and when maybe I buy some tickets later on. So that's the kind of, those two fundamental things are what we're searching for within the candidates that we bring in. Yeah,
the curiosity thing I think is a really, really great point, and I want to make sure that I highlight this too, because I try to, whenever I do a sales training, and granted I don't do them
that often, right? But I do them, a couple times a year. The biggest key that I try to teach people is about that curiosity thing, right? Because and this is the way I explained it, and maybe I'm either onto something or way off base. And you tell me, I'm wrong all the time, so it's totally great. But is that if you're curious and if you're paying attention to talking to a prospect or a customer about what's going on in their business, you should be able to draw connections. And by drawing those connections, you should have drawn connections from a wide variety of sources and people. That makes you a trusted advisor. And if you're a trusted advisor, you're not selling them a set of tickets, right? I mean, sometimes you are, but like what we're talking about here, I think, is we're talking about the more complex sale. Is if you're a trusted advisor, you're not really selling a specific product or a specific set of advertising or a box or anything. You're selling a solution to a problem. And if you're selling a solution to a problem, then you're in a position of strength. Am I wrong, or am I like completely, or is that what you see?
Yeah, and that's 100%. Like, long gone are the days of of just saying, "Hey, here's your tickets. Go buy them." Like those aren't. That's not what people are looking for. Like, it's funny. One of our big things here is we don't sell tickets. We don't even sell soccer here necessarily. We're trying to sell the experience, right? And so that's how we've tried to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. Soccer, for those of you unfamiliar with MLS in North America is very different than any of the other sort of the hockey, the basketball, everything else. It's really fan-led supporter culture. There's just a bunch of differentiators in there. And for us in the marketplace, that's what we're trying to sell. So it's really, you can't sell an experience to somebody unless, exactly as you said, unless you're that advisor and you're like trying to figure out what kind of experience they want, because everybody wants something a little bit different.
Right. Yeah. And the idea of the culture and the atmosphere is, I think maybe people don't pay it enough attention, because I think it should translate to basketball and hockey and baseball and football. But MLS, if they do one thing better than everybody else, it's that fan-led culture. Like, I was at the DC United game the other day, and the supporter section, I mean, it really sets a tone for the building. Yeah. It's awesome. It's great. I was always poo-pooing it, right? But I go, and I love it. I mean, I love soccer just to begin with, right? Everybody who knows me knows that I'm a big Tottenham's fan, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I love it, but I go to DC United matches pretty regularly now because of that atmosphere. It's fun to take my son. It's fun to take my family. The atmosphere, it's like, you do feel something. It's great. And you said, to turn it back to the conversation, though, about not selling tickets but selling experiences. Now, I'm sure that translates into your value proposition. And how do you teach your team to talk about value when it relates to the experience?
Yeah, so that part, that's probably one of the hardest parts, is because the first thing you got to do is find out what kind of experience they want. Because I'll tell one of my favorite stories, and I tell this story literally to every single one of our new reps as part of this academy. The one session I sort of still keep my fingers on is it's an hour sit down with every, on the first couple days with the reps. And so this is sort of the key fundamental thing, part of selling the experience. When I first took over tickets here, it was, fair point, I'd never sold tickets before. I'd been on the corporate partnership side with the Canucks and Comcast Spectacor and all those guys. So never sold season tickets previously. So one of the big things was took over ticketing. Okay, I just want to find out why people are buying. So got my guys to just pull me a random list of a whole bunch of our current season ticket members, phoned them up. So we got this guy, Bill. Bill was been a member with us for like 3 years, had attended, his great attendance rate, everything else. So just, 2 tickets and just sort of our standard sort of average corner seats. Phone up Bill, said, "Hey Bill, Colby, just trying to understand, thanks for being a member. How's your experience been? Just trying to dig in deep a little bit here and just sort of see why you bought tickets and that." He's like, "Oh, sure. So big soccer fan? Nope, not at all." Oh, okay. You got a favorite player on the Whitecaps? No. I probably couldn't name 3 players. Oh, okay. So I'm like, oh, okay. Let's go down the corporate path. Oh, so you probably use these for work? No. Oh, okay. So you give your tickets away, family or something? No. I go to every game. I'm like, okay. So again, asking the questions. I'm going through, and I'm like, okay. So you go to every game? Yeah. Okay. And so who do you bring? Oh, I bring my daughter. Oh, okay. So she's a huge fan? No, not really. I'm like, so honestly, this went on for like 5 minutes. I'm like hitting brick wall after brick wall. So finally, I was just like, Bill, listen, I really appreciate you being a season ticket member, but like, why? Like, why are you a season ticket member, man? I have no idea. And he said, I'm a 45-year-old man with a 14-year-old daughter. He's like, you know what a 45-year-old man has in common with a 14-year-old girl? He's like, nothing. She talks in a language, if she even talks, when she's not on her phone, she's using LOLs and smiley faces, and the music she listens to is garbage. Like the way she dresses, I can't deal with. He's like, but I took her to a Whitecaps game. We had a really good time, and so all of a sudden that became our thing. And so now I get 18, sometimes 19 games a year where I get her for 3-4 hours, because we usually do dinner or lunch or whatever before or after the game. And he's like, I got maybe 4 years before she's moving out, going to college, doing whatever her thing is. He's like, man, you could charge me like $3,000 a game. I wouldn't care, because this is time I can't get back. And I was just like, at the time, I was a brand new dad. I was like, hey, yeah, okay, great, thanks. So I ended the call, really appreciate it. Hung up the phone, and it just hit me hard. It was like, there's an experience for Bill in this case that, like, on paper, he's the worst lead of all time, right? Like, doesn't like soccer, doesn't like anything. So it was, but the experience that the Whitecaps provided him and his daughter are those memories that you can't sell. You can't, like, those are invaluable. So trying to find a value proposition like that. Now, Bill's a bit of an extreme example, I guess, but that's it. Like that's a huge thing for him. And now we don't charge him $3,000 a game, but like, he's like, yeah, that I couldn't do that better. So it's that's the kind of thing that we're trying to get them to search for.
Yeah, no, I think that the extreme example probably is better, because it shows you that you sometimes have to really, really search for what the answer is, right? Mm-hmm. And that the answer is not always obvious, because one of my core ideas that I try to preach all the time is that you aren't your market. So like, you and me, we like sports, right? Yeah. So the thing is like, we're looking at Bill just like you were when you were talking to him and going, hey, I don't understand, right? Yeah. But then the thing is, it's like, as soon as you got to the answer, it was obvious. And so like, from that obvious answer that you spent 15, 20 minutes, however long it was digging for, you could make a whole lot of decisions based on that one decision, based on that one piece of information that he gave you. And I think that when I teach value proposition, and when I talk about value proposition, that story is one that I'm often searching for, because I like to tell the story of when I was selling tickets in New York, right? And this guy would call me up, and I don't remember his name now, but he was telling me, oh, I have $200 to spend on Yankees tickets to take a huge prospect.
Yeah.
And at the time I was on the secondary market. So, just for clarity's sake, but the guy, and I was like, well, I started talking to him. I was like, well, what are you trying to do? Oh, is this like new business? Is this like a new old client? Oh, he's like, oh my God, this is like a huge client, like a huge prospect. It's like going to be a huge deal. It's going to be whatever. And I was like, well, $100 for like Yankees and Red Sox is going to get you like, this is like early 2000s. So like baseball is hot, Yankees, Red Sox.
Yeah.
Get you like in the outfield, right? Like in like a really bad seat. But for like $200 a ticket, I can get you behind the dugouts, right? And understanding that he was trying to win business, and he was understanding how valuable the prospect was to him. The difference of $100 a ticket, it wasn't like the cost, because I think sometimes too, and this is another question, when we're talking about objections and cost and value, a lot of times the price objection is a throwaway. At least in my experience, it is because, and it comes out because you haven't hit that nail on the head with like Bill, where's the time with his daughter, or like I did with the person who was looking to really like win a multi-million-dollar contract, right? $100 to win a multi-million is a bargain.
Yeah, oh yeah,
yeah. $200 and some beers is like a friggin' value for that. So how do you teach that value thing, that we have been talking about here, and how do you frame it in the idea of overcoming objections? And then also, like, the thing is, I guess the other part of it is like creating urgency, because that seem to me all three of these things go hand in hand.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the urgency piece here is that's a whole other conversation, is, urgency and scarcity, in the old ticket days are gone, because like you said, the secondary market, all of the different things. So we put way more value on the value side and just trying to find it, because like there's no more sellouts, right? Like there's no more, like, now it's sort of like even the best seats in the house, you can, if you want to open up the wallet enough, you can get the best seats in the house. So trying to find that value within the value proposition, or explain it through our corporate guys, it's easy, because it's we actually, my premium guys, Tom, he does one of the best jobs I've heard. He's just like talking about, especially if he knows he's talking to a corporate client, exactly like you just said, hey, what's your best customer worth to you as a business? And it doesn't matter whether he's the local plumber or the multi-million-dollar, CEO of the tech startup here. Everybody's value of their best customer is, 10% of their overall net worth, of the company. And so he just says, okay, so you're talking, even Bill the plumber is like, hey, that contract can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, so like a suite in that case, now we're talking about like $2,000. Like, do the math. You think, and you can have the opportunity to bring in 13 of those guys who get turned. So the value, from a pure ROI standpoint, the corporate guys are almost easier, just because you can use just the metrics, right? You can use proper return on investment. You can use sort of like the hard numbers in it. The hardest ones is trying to provide the value with the sports fan, the soccer fan, whoever it might be. And that's why we concentrate on the experience side, because with the experience, then once you can figure out what kind of experience they want, then you can start crafting. And again, it goes right back to, if you give it to them straight, as you become that trusted advisor, you become trustworthy. And then they start going, okay, you know what? Yeah, I like your guy. I only expected to maybe spend $100 a ticket, but you know what? Yeah, it's worth doing $200 a ticket now, because I actually trust you, and this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, the experience, if you want to take your kids to a match and you're just looking to create those memories, hey, great. Okay. We can do that. But if you want to go and sit down by the field because this is your kid's 15th birthday and, he's about to, move away to college soon, and you're trying to create that. Okay. Hey, that's a very different conversation. Or, the corporate side, the everything else. There's a whole bunch of different experiences, and it's just trying to find what kind of experience you're trying to do.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you didn't label it this, so I'll label it this. But we were talking about value, and you're really drawing the difference between tangible and intangible value, and they both are really, really powerful. And one thing I want to ask you about, this is like bears from my own experiences, like all too often when I'm talking to people who are selling partnerships or like into businesses and everything else, they think that the only kind of ROI that they really can show is tangible, right? They think the only reason that they're making that decision is tangible, right? Which is fine. It's totally great because you can really show it pretty easily, right? But I think people sometimes miss, how do I want to say it? They don't give enough credit to the intangible value that you can show a corporate buyer. And how do you deal with that? And like what are some of the things that your team does pretty well to highlight that as well? Because I often say that the corporate buyer is more emotional than the regular, like just average ticket consumer because their tail's on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, people are more scared of the boss coming down and cracking the whip on the old budget line item for social spend than they are on the old family finance sometimes, for sure. I think one of the again, I'm going to keep going back to Tom. He's one of our Tom Dunn. He's one of our best guys here. He's really changed our premium sales side, and so he actually I just heard him say this the other day. It was clients, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, try to remember it properly here, but it's basically like clients don't remember what they made you feel or what you did for them. They don't remember what you did for them, but they remember how you made them feel, right? And so it's not necessarily, it's the low cost, high value gifts, right? It's about bringing the bottle of wine to a birthday party or a housewarming or whatever the case is. Bottle of wine, a good bottle, a half decent bottle of wine, whatever. Your $15 Shiraz, right? You can bring that, but you bring another $15 gift. That's not very good. It's that low cost, but a bottle of wine has a high value in the social scene. So same thing. Maybe you're only spending a couple $100 on a ticket. But you're giving them that experience that they go, oh yeah, this is Dave was really good. I just had a good time hanging out with Dave, and you know what? I think I'm going to give him that business, that contract, that whatever the case might be. It's the intangible piece is that feeling, just how you make them feel. We have that discussion around here all the time on like parking passes, right? Like parking for our stadium is tough, like it is for a bunch of stadiums around all over the place. But it's like, if you can just slide a client a $10 parking pass, all of a sudden they go, oh man, thank you. It's not worth the $10. You've just gotten $100, $500, $10,000 of good feeling for a $10 parking pass, right? Whatever the case might be.
Well, that's like my friend Gary Adler, who's the executive director of the NATB, the National Association of Ticket Brokers, it calls this phenomenon of like never like doing something like you just said about giving the parking pass away, jumping over dollars to get to dimes.
Yeah, totally.
And I like it because it completely is true. And then the other thing you said about like people, hiring me just because I make them feel good or they have a good time and they feel comfortable. That A, happens to me all the time, but B, I think that we shouldn't underestimate that because the thing is like so many of the ideas and so many of the problems and challenges or situations that people are dealing with are so stressful that having somebody who is a trusted advisor who can understand the situation, have empathy, can offer a point of view or an idea about something, or can just make things go a little bit easier or a little bit better, it's extremely valuable, right? And so I really hope people don't paper over that because one of the things I fear sometimes with especially like sports selling is it becomes too much of a transaction and not enough of a relationship. And the relationship thing is where the magic really happens because you can't. None of our markets are big enough that we can turn and burn our our people that fast, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need relationships with these things, and that's like one of the things that's really, I think, great about what you guys are up to is that you have, and you describe it as like an NCAA approach where you're going to have your people at least for 4 years. And I think 4 years, and especially when you combine it with the idea that you brought up at the beginning about people, Canada having a small talent pool as far as sellers going, 4 years you can develop a pretty substantial relationship, and likely in most cases, those people, the kids that you're bringing into the academy and growing, they're going to be able to take their experience with the Whitecaps and they're going to be able to take it out into the community. And even though maybe you don't benefit directly, the indirect benefit is great because they know that, like, if I have a account executive that's dealing with me, they're going to be here for a couple of years. I'm going to deal with them. And then if I do transition, the person after them is going to be there for a couple of years, and they're going to have the same level of service, and they're going to have a focus on relationship building, and it's never going to be transactional. And I think that's like really, really key. So when you talk about this NCAA approach, what do you do to sustain that? How do you encourage that? Like, how does that take hold in the organization? Because I know that 4 years for most sports organizations in the state, that's, you might get the gold watch. I mean, because like most of the time it's like a year or two, if not less, in a lot of places. And I not just disruptive to the organization. It's just, to me, it's unhealthy.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that came down through a whole bunch of I unleashed my business intelligence guys and data and just tried to say, okay, where's it look like? And so what we found was at 3 year mark, is sort of that's the peak. Not that they decline after 3 years, but at 3 years, that's where they become like a good salesperson hits sort of that 8, sometimes 10x what they're bringing in, right? Like that first year, and we crunched it right down to the numbers. So, our first year guy in our marketplace with our ticket prices and everything else, they're generally bringing in about $100,000 in ticket revenue. And if they do that, perfect. Year 2 is just over 200. And year 3, they're like 4, 5, 6. That's where it's clicked. And 100%, like you said, it's generally because of the relationships. They've got a good book of business. They are getting the referrals. They've got their sort of their sales personality down. They've got all of those things working for them. And then year 4, they're riding that out and they're making good money, and they're all the things are right. But unfortunately, this isn't just sports, but like anything, the opportunities to advance are just not always there. Some, hey, yeah, absolutely. We have manager opportunities. We have, the opportunities to have them go into different locations, wherever it might be, whether it's within the organization or, move over to partnerships or whatever the case might be. But at a certain point, they kind of go, okay, what's next? Right. And so that's where the 4 years came from.
But that's really well thought out. That's like, you went through and you used the data that you have available in like a really informed manner to figure out where that was. So it's not like, and if you don't want to answer the question, or B, if you don't know the answer, it's totally fine. And I won't be upset. And I know my audience won't be upset. Yeah. But what kind of like turnover rate do you have in the first year? Like how many people, maybe typically come in, and how many people stay with you to make it through the whole process? And how, like, what do they drop out at like along the way?
Yeah, so we've got a 70% hit rate on the 4 years.
So 70% of the people make it through all 4 years. That's where unbelievable.
That's where we're at now.
Yeah,
like we started, and that's sort of refining this process over the last 8 years now, basically, just because it's the recruiting at the front end has made the biggest difference, and then ultimately it's because the two things we promise, and you sort of alluded to it earlier, the two things we promise when we bring them in is it's meritocracy. So we've built in these levels intentionally. So you come in as an account specialist. So that's sort of our version of the inside sales person. account specialist, but as soon as you hit 100,000 in revenue, you're switching over to account executive, and then we have a senior account executive after that.
And so the path forward is really clear. It's really spelled out. So like somebody goes, I know exactly what it takes to get me to the next level.
100%. So if that we had somebody, it's never happened. I'd love it to, but if somebody comes in that first year and cranks through and does 400 grand in revenue, guess what? They're a senior account executive right away. They get to jump 2 levels essentially. Now that's few and far in between, and it doesn't really happen. But at least when they're sitting down, they know, okay, now I have that. Now I see the roadmap to what I can do. And the other thing is we just say, hey, listen, like we want open dialogue with our, which we ask for a lot of trust up front, which is why we try to be transparent with the recruits who are coming in and to say, listen, if this isn't for you, I'd rather know in the first 3 months, because those first 3 months, if you're coming in and you're just like, I don't want to come in and pick up the phone. I don't want to, like, I love soccer, but sales just isn't for me. Hey, that's fine. Like that happens, man. Like this is your opportunity to say that and realize that now, because then it's better for you and it's better for us, and we'll help you move out into a different role, or whether it's within the organization or not. But that happens. So we ask for that trust ahead of time so that we can get to the heart of it, because I've had 2 of my best service people here were both came in under the sales stream. And when I love it here, I'm really good at this side of the equation, building the relationships, doing all these things, but like I don't know if I really like the sales side. And we went, you know what? Let's switch you over to the service side. And honestly, they're 2 of my best service reps over here, and because they are really strong with the relationships and doing those things. So it's really trying to take all of that information and then just feeding the right people and the right thing, and making sure that they're doing it. But getting it right at the front end is the hardest part for sure.
Yeah, and you said something, and this brings me back to a conversation that I had a few years back with Ryan McCoy, who was with the Marlins at the time, and we talked about motivating your sales team, right? And one of the things, there's a couple things here that I think really highlight motivation in a positive manner, which is the first thing is like you're trying to be open and build trust, right? And I think that's helpful because everybody throws around the idea of like, oh, millennials this or Gen Z that, right? And I usually, I frankly think those kind of mass generalizations are a little bit stupid, to be completely blunt, right? Because if I take any population, I can draw some random conclusions and make up a bunch of garbage if I want to. I mean, I can do it. I mean, I've got data at my hands. Yeah. But the other thing that I think really is great is having a clear roadmap, right? So it's not like random, how you're going to get forward. Like, so I know that like, if I get to 200, if I make $100,000 in sales, I'm going to get moved up to the next position. So it's clear what I have to do. So then I can say, well, am I meeting my expectations, exceeding my expectations, or not meeting my expectations pretty clearly? And the choice is up to me whether, it's not like, well, Colby hates me. No, it's like I'm not making the sales that are going to get me to this next level. So then it's on me to go back and say, how can I improve? Or, like you said, maybe sales isn't for me, right? And I really love it because I feel like this is just a better way to build a sales organization, and right? It's like clarity and consistency and like clear goals and objectives. Because I coach my 9-year-old soccer team, and we set clear goals for the kids, right? And the kids respond to that, right? And they're not really tough, right? Because they're 9-year-olds, but it's like, pay attention, right? Like if your head's not in the game, like how often can you be, or hustle the whole time? And you can tell if you're not hustling or not, right? You're not, if you're playing hard, right? It's the same thing with like a sales team, right? If you're on course to get $100,000 in a season, not on course to get $100,000, whatever else. so I guess I already answered my own question, but I want to hear it from you. Is like this helps with the motivation, right? This helps you with like the culture. This helps you with all those positive kind of attributes that you're looking for, right? Or am I wrong?
Percent. And the to exactly to that point, Hugh and Christine, who are sales managers here, the two of them, Hugh says it best. He sits down or she sits down, depending on which team it's on, and they break it down to the ridiculous, is what we call it. So we essentially they sit down and build out a business plan, if you will, for each one of the reps, so that they can hit that, whether it's the 100, the 200, the 400, whatever. And that's where, the data and the personalities start really coming out. So we'll look at like, hey, your close rate over email is, whatever, it's 10% right now. So, and your average sale is only $200. So like, let's start breaking this down. That means you need to send out, 300 emails a day at your average to hit that, but your face-to-face meetings are closing at 20%. So how do you balance these things out? And like, so they literally will map out the next 3 months of, okay, here's how you can get to hit that number to make sure that you're getting there. And that if that's your goal to hit that 400 and become the senior account exec, all right, here's the ridiculous amount of detail that you need to get to, down to the day, down to the hour, down to whatever the case is, and not make it robotic, but like understanding what it takes to get there. So it's not just this nebulous number floating around out there. It's like, here's what it looks like.
Yeah, but again, that's awesome, because most of the time, and I'm sure, I don't know, maybe you haven't, but I've been in these sales or like these places, and then when I was in sales roles, where it's like going, you just get the random, like I would have, my goal would be $250,000 or $300,000 of sales in a year, right? At like this place, and there would be no roadmap. There would be nothing there, and really, it would even be worse. It would be like when all the good accounts are like, and this is where you fall into the thing where like, what's a good account, what's a bad account, and like, if you do the process right. Yeah. In this case, though, I think my track record says that if I say it was like, I wasn't set up for success, I think I can say that safely, and people won't go, well, you were just awful. And I might have been awful, so that could be true. But if all the accounts are signed out and like you're really just calling on like nickel and, like small like nickel and dime accounts, and you have a huge goal, it's maybe even unrealistic that you're not being put in the position to succeed. So like when you're talking about, let's set you up so you know what $400,000 in sales is going to look like, I think it's really great, because like a lot of times you just don't know. You need a little help on what the road looks like to get there, and I think that's fantastic. And the other thing I really wanted to touch on, but I want to be conscious of your time here, was you talked about selling via email. And I know that I've had a number of sales agents in the States email me, and or they called me or like, sent me messages and stuff and talked about how like their sales culture in their organization doesn't look as using email as like really selling. And you just talked about it, and I was like, well, I think email is great, right? If I get a response, right, I think it's awesome. And that's like, especially if you're selling tickets like we are, especially like individual tickets or like small packages and stuff, it can be like a much more time effective way. What are, how, and maybe just like in a big overview way, talk about like the role of lead generation and how, a couple of different ways that you do create leads, because I know like email or social media or phone calls, those are all like big kind of barrels. And then like sometimes like marketing, especially in sports, a lot of places doesn't get the proper positioning as a lead generation tool. So when you talk about email, it brought me back to thinking about lead generation. Yeah.
And I mean, we spend, I spend a ridiculous amount of time on this for both the good and the bad. And this is probably the part where technology has changed for us anyways in our organization the most over the last 5 years. Because by the time, and again, this is one of the sayings we have around here, and it was just sort of back as we were chatting previously about change. It's sort of one of my Colbyisms that I use ad nauseum, if you ask probably my staff, is we're a lab, not a factory, right? Like, let's try stuff. Like, and it's sort of trying to, let's try it. We sell soccer here. Nobody's going to die if this leads, strategy doesn't work. Like, it just means maybe some less sales. So we'll figure it out. So right now, by the time the leads get into the sales team's hands that aren't personally generated from them just being out and about at events and different things, by the time the leads come in from our marketing department or our community department out there, they've already been, to a certain extent, qualified. And we do that, things like, so we're Salesforce CRM with Core. So, we have things like the marketing journeys that as soon as a lead comes in, whether it's just a random contest or the Caps Cruiser, which is our community vehicle that's out on the street, and even our single match buyers, as they're coming in, they're self-qualifying to a certain extent. So, hey, how many games have they been to? How many have they? Are they already a season ticket member? We got to scrub for that. All of those different things, and then it's, how was your experience of the last game, right? How all of these little touch points that they get. So when the sales team gets them, they go, oh, okay, this person's already been to 3 games this season. Okay, I've got a good sense he or she is looking for, it just helps the conversation already. And so we've got the lead scoring and all of these different things, but honestly, it changes probably every 3 weeks, just as we keep refining and A/B testing and all the fun stuff that the business intelligence guys like to talk about.
No, that's awesome, and I think that's probably number one. I think with the kind of like constant innovation of your lead generation strategy, that's a great point to leave on. And also, we really didn't touch on change nearly enough.
Yeah.
I know that was like one of the things we wanted to talk about. But how can people find you on the internet?
I'm where am I now these days? LinkedIn, Colby Fackler. So it's it's COLBY, F as in Frank, ACKLER. So LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Twitter is primarily work stuff, which is good. And all the other socials are on sort of more the personal side. So I leave the work side of that. But and then I love talking ticketing. I obviously read your stuff all the time, and so anybody wants to geek out on ticket strategy and sales strategy and all that stuff, by all means, it's C Fackler at whitecapsfc.com.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll put a link. I'll try to link to everything in the show notes. But I want to thank you for doing this. I think this was I had a lot of fun. I think we probably could have gone on for like much longer, but we'll save that for a second time. Because this is like the nice thing about the podcast. It's not like I'm Mark Maron, where I'm giving you the Mark Maron treatment. I am giving you the treatment, but you can come back. It's like totally cool. So and thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, Dave. No, really appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank Colby Fackler from the Vancouver Whitecaps for taking the time to talk to me on the Business Fun podcast. I'm really curious about what you think and what you learned from this podcast. Again, I could be wrong. I could be biased. I thought that this was maybe one of the best podcasts that I've done. Give me your feedback on this episode or any of them by sending me an email. It's my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. You can also visit my website. That's www.davewakeman.com, where you can find my blog. You'll be able to find soon a calendar and a store that's going to tell you all kinds of interesting stuff that I'm up to. It's going to give you some new ways to engage with me. It's going to be great, including, let me tease something that's coming up. There's going to be a special announcement next week, I believe, about a certain someone that you are listening to in your ear holes right now going to a certain place that I've never been before that is a long flight from D.C., 24 hours or so to be exact. And it's really going to be an exciting thing. I don't want to give the whole thing away because we've got a whole launch built around this announcement, but make sure you check my website, www.davewakeman.com. I'd also love it if you follow me on Twitter. I'm at David Wakeman on Twitter. I mention this all the time, and it's kind of a joke on the podcast, but I'm serious. If you know the person who has the at Dave Wakeman Twitter handle, get it for me. The guy has not tweeted since 2014. He doesn't need it. I need it. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post updates. I have a really great email prospecting group on there that I'd love to have you become a member of, a part of. We have some discussions. I share content. It's great. Also, you can check with me and you can get my email newsletter. I haven't done a very good job of promoting that on here, but you should. I do an email newsletter. It comes out on Sundays. It's called The Business of Value. And it focuses on how you can create value, how you can explain value better, just all the tangible and intangible forms of value. And it's kind of my most intimate thing that I do. Colby is a member of the newsletter. He gets it each week. And he said the one I wrote last week about marketing being about discomfort and creating discomfort was one that he shared with his entire team, the entire Whitecaps organization. Just to give you a little heads up, that's the one that I've had the most reaction from. I've gotten people all over the world emailing me back going, that thing was powerful, and that helped me create change. So if you want to get that, email me, dave@davewakeman.com, put newsletter in the headline, and I will get you signed up. As always, if you dig what I'm doing with the podcast, can you do me a favor? Would you share it with somebody you think would benefit from it? That would be helpful. That would be great. It would help me continue to grow the audience. Also, if you're really into what we're doing, subscribe. I'm on Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play. I think there's some new ones that are going to come online in the next couple of days. Basically, anywhere you can get podcasts, you can get me. So if you dig it, subscribe. That way you don't miss an episode. And if you are so inclined, I would love it if you'd leave a review, a testimonial, or some kind of review about what you've learned, what you thought of the Business of Fun. Rate it, review it, do all that stuff. It helps make sure that people discover the podcast. It helps increase the likelihood of me being able to get great guests like Colby or Kat Spencer from Booking Protect or Martin Gameltoff from Activity Stream, Joe Michelle from Australia. All the great conversations I've had. These things help. It makes me look a little bit more legitimate, a little more real, because this podcast has grown exponentially over the first year. And I'm looking to make this thing even better in the second year. So your reviews, you're sharing it with your colleagues and your friends, subscribing, all of these things, they help make sure that I continue to be able to do some of these really cool things and have these really great conversations. So please do that for me. As always, I want to thank my friends at Booking Protect for sponsoring the Business of Fun podcast. They are some of the best people in the ticket industry. If you want to give your customers the world's best refund protection product, you need to visit www.bookingprotect.com and find out how you can work with them. They have a proprietary, award-winning digital customer service platform that's unlike any customer service platform you've probably ever experienced online. It is a key differentiator. They provide the most comprehensive refund protection product of anyone in the world. And they do help you get a new revenue stream for your organization, which is very, very important, especially when you have a brand name like the Revenue Architect. So make sure you check them out at www.bookingprotect.com or email me and I'll put you in touch with the right person. I couldn't do this without them. They're just fantastic partners. And I couldn't do it without you. So until I see you again, thank you for listening and take it easy. I'll talk to you later.